UvA, that is in University of Amsterdam. She will graduate in September 2021. Prior to this, Ninian received a BA in law and a LLM in public international law. Her research interests include Western esotericism, sidereal astrology, and the works and psychology of Carl Gustav Jung. After graduating, Ninian also wishes to further her academic career with a PhD. With this, Ninian, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Miranko.
In progress.
Okay. Yes, so welcome to my presentation. Thank you that I have this opportunity to be here. So yeah, I will be explaining in this talk how psychological healing could be experienced as a religious experience according to Jungian psychology. So who was Carl Jung? Carl Jung was a Swiss psychiatrist and psychologist from the 20th century and also the founder of analytical psychology. The Jungian approach to psychology and mental illness harbors an innate religious character, stressing the importance of spirituality and religion for mental health. His approach was more akin to a phenomenological approach to religion, as he defined it as in a rather broad way, based on experience. So Jung defined religion as an attitude peculiar to a consciousness which has been altered by the experience of the numinosum. The numinosum he took from a work by Rudolf Otto, The Idea of the Holy. Other major inspirational figures for his psychology were also William James. And the numinous, or the numinosum, Jung defined as an effect, not caused by any arbitrary act of will, but an effect with emotional value, somehow altering one's state of consciousness. So he saw religion as an experience felt as that the person was seized and controlled by religion, being always rather its victim than its creator. He saw religion as inherent to the psyche, referring to humankind as also some sort of a homo religiosus, seeing religion as an impulse or instinct. Religion he saw as having a functional value for our consciousness, seeing it as a moral code or a moral framework that has guided us to navigate life and navigate life's hard and difficult questions. So he saw mental illness kind of arising when a person is confronted with one's shadow or one's darker side. And what he sought was not to give psychological explanations for religious phenomena or religion, but more like psychological translations of said phenomena. And I will give some of those translations throughout this talk, where, for instance, in psychological language, mental illness is seen as a confrontation with the shadow. In religious language, this could be seen as a confrontation with evil. So before we go into kind of an example of how this journey towards mental or psychological healing goes, I'll first go a bit about some of the concepts of Jungian psychology, especially when it comes to our psyche. So Jung saw the ego as the center of consciousness, most easily experienced as it is our I. Our persona is the mask we wear to the outside world. It's the image of ourselves that we portray and also how we want to be perceived. Then below the threshold of consciousness, we have the shadow, which is partly in the personal unconscious, which is everything that one has seen, experienced, felt, everything that one has in also memories, etc. And then the collective unconscious, which stands independently of personal conscious, which is inherited by one's ancestors, which is universal, which is kind of almost the realm in which everything from our culture or history is stored. Then also we have the anima animus, which I won't really go into for this talk, but it's basically the counterpart. So if one who identifies as a man would have an anima, which is his kind of female counterpart within the unconscious, and vice versa, the animus for those who identify as a woman. And the self is kind of the overarching personality, or actually something that is unknowable, that is both consciousness and unconsciousness, and also something that one strives towards in the process of individuation. So when it comes to mental disorder, Jung saw that, that repressing contents that one does not like about oneself would not make them go away. They would be pushed into the shadow. Basically, they're growing into a life of their own, splitting off of consciousness, forming into complexes. Jung actually also saw that these complexes behaved a bit like demons, requiring work, shadow work, or in then religious language, exorcism. He saw that, you know, psychology was more, or mental healing was more a curing of the soul, instead of the more contemporary conception at the time that mental illness stemmed from physical causes. And he saw it as kind of relating to a redemption from evil when somebody would be possessed by demons. So he actually saw that the idea that psychic entities such as demons, wizards, witches, gods, and angels could influence the human mind and body, which is found throughout all of human history, was everywhere. And that basically the prejudice that mental illness was caused by only physical phenomena was relatively new in the grander scheme of things. And he actually saw that these angels and demons and the like were manifestations of the unconscious, thereby kind of psychologizing those manifestations as well. So you might be wondering what happens then when somebody is faced with an unfortunate mental predicament. Jung obviously named a lot of cases in his work. I have one example here of a male patient who was identified as a thinker, always rationalizing, always forcing everything under his intellect and under his reason. But actually then he was confronted with the fact that reason and intellect was giving a false sense of security. He was struck by the belief that he had cancerous formations in his body, full well knowing that he was physically fine, that it was an irrational conviction, but still being tortured by this belief that still felt very real. And he saw that this obsession was now forcing him to let go of his reason and intellect, which had normally provided him with a false sense of power and security, and he now had to submit himself to a force that proved beyond his control, and also push to relinquish control that he had made himself believe he had. So Jung regarded actually mythology, just as other manifestations of either art or religion, and its stories as sources in which psychological issues could be explained metaphorically. In this case, he referred to the myth of Gilgamesh. And I quote, "When in the Babylonian epos, Gilgamesh's arrogance and pride defied the gods, they invent and create a man equal in strength to Gilgamesh in order to check the hero's unlawful ambition. Gilgamesh, however, escaped the revenge of the gods. He had warning dreams to which he paid attention. They showed him how he could overcome his foe, our patient, living in an age where the gods have become extinct and are even in bad repute, also had such dreams, but he did not listen to them. Because how could an intelligent man be so superstitious as to take dreams seriously?" So Jung kind of saw that also the prejudice towards dreams was actually doing us a disservice, seeing dreams as sources in which we were kind of provided and through which communicated in archetypes and symbolism how we could deal with certain life situations that were giving us discomfort or disorder. And these archetypes were very important. Archetypes can be seen as primordial images, as bit related to Plato's ideas. These were kind of perfect, ideal concepts of certain archetypes, but most of the time they would be expressed through symbolism, so one archetype can have a variety of different representations. One very important self-archetype was the mandala, which is also found in Oriental religion. And he saw the mandala often appearing in the imaginations or the dreams of his patients that were going through a period of disorder, kind of compensating for said disorder with this image of order and wholeness. Saw it as an attempt at self-healing on the part of nature, which does not spring from conscious reflection, but from an instinctive impulse. So basically the collective unconscious or ourselves would give us these perfect structures in a way to kind of soothe us and to kind of compensate for the felt disorder, to kind of rebalance the scales. And it's actually interesting that nowadays you also see a lot of coloring books where you can draw and color mandalas, and it's actually regarded as a rather meditative and soothing experience. So he also saw the self as a bit of a god within us. And this is a quote from Symbols of Transformation. In general, psychic energy or libido creates the God image by making use of archetypal patterns. And man in consequence worships the psychic force active within him as something divine. We thus arrive at the objectional conclusion that, from the psychological point of view, the God image is a real but subjective phenomenon. So this is basically how Jung dealt with the idea of God in his professional work, seeing as something that might not be able to verify objectively, but still something that subjectively had a place within our lives, within our experience, and therefore was regarded as very real within that experience. So then to individuation. So individuation can be seen as the overarching journey through which psychological healing manifests. It's also a journey of growth. Individuation naturally happens in the later part of life, according to Jung, and it can be seen as a bit of a spiritual alchemical quest, a road towards enlightenment, or a road to becoming whole with the self. And he saw this individuation happening naturally in two-step process, where kind of this two-step process was a bit instinctive. When in the first step, the unconscious pushes towards a discrepancy of consciousness, in which, such as the conviction that one has cancer while one is physically fine. And then also it's kind of automatically then pushed towards the integration of the suppressed contents. So the mental disturbance itself is a cry for help, within it already the cure. It facilitates the facing of one's dark side and the acceptance of integration of those aspects. So it's kind of accepting and integrating all parts of their self, whether they are regarded as bad or good, etc. And this process then expands consciousness. In the same sense, again, that mental disturbance then calls for individuation, demonic possession calls for exorcism. And this is then how psychological healing can be experienced as a religious experience, in the same way that some religious experiences can also have a psychological healing effect. And that was my bibliography. And I thank you for listening.